Found footage is a genre in which the story is told through something like a VHS tape, haunted PlayStation 1 game, or even a YouTube video. The term found footage has changed quite a lot since it was first coined by something like the Blair Witch Project. We'll get into more in-depth about that later. But the basic consensus is that found footage is anything that puts the story in the universe. Like the what you are witnessing will be viewed through the lens of the person filming. It's like you are peering in to their world. And that really helps with characterizing people in found footage, or at least it should. But it can just really make you feel like you are in there. You are just watching someone's experience rather than having a story be told to you. And that is what the Blair Witch Project, I think, succeeds most in, and I think is probably colloquially known as the best example of found footage. In the Blair Witch Project, the filmmakers made a website documenting the town's history, as well as adding hints of world building about the Blair Witch herself. In addition to the website, they hung missing posters for the actors and claimed that the film was found in a bag in the woods, and even faked the disappearances and the deaths of the actors so people went into the movie thinking all of it was real. People who went into the movie knowing nothing about it found it not scary, and that's why its status is very controversial. People just say, oh, it's just grainy footage of a group of friends walking through the woods. But for those who knew what they were getting into, they thought this was real. They thought that this was a true tape of some paranormal happenings, and that must have made the climax of the movie extremely unsettling. By making the story real, it intensifies the final act of the film and makes it much more eerie. That style of storytelling is what would eventually shape ARGs. The feeling of unease, watching a tape or home video, everything feeling real, just to have the veil of reality and fiction blurred to the point the audience can't discern what is real. That is what the genre of fiction tries to achieve, but what unfiction unintentionally achieved with movies like The Blair Witch Project. Some other examples, and some of my personal favorites, would be movies like Creep, Cloverfield, Lake Mungo, and my personal favorite, VHS 94, I Love Deformed Rat Monsters. And that pretty much wraps up everything on my segment about found footage. Now we're gonna hand it over to my good friend, Crainuimgames, very own Joseph, and we are going to learn a little bit about analog horror. Only thing is, there's this, which I didn't have this planned in the script. This was just here, so I don't see what the harm in playing it could be.
Thanks for the introduction, Clementine. Analog horror is inspired by the found footage genre. It's normally characterized by low-quality graphics, cryptic messages, and the name comes from analog technology, like old VHS and cassette tapes, VCRs, old televisions, and just about every piece of technology from the 1960s to the 1990s, which is also the time frame in which a majority of analog horror series take place, because everything scary happens in the 80s. If you're watching this video, you've most definitely watched, or at least heard of, Local 58, Gemini Home Entertainment, The Walton Files, and The Mandela Catalog. These are textbook examples of analog horror. The spooky faces, sudden cuts of silence, and unsettling vibe in general. But what exactly makes these series so scary? What is scary about a blue bunny walking around in a field playing games with his friends while some hippo says, "Apples"? Well, I'm here to explain that. A lot of analog horror features commercial or government-issued videos that start off normal, but slowly, or abruptly, depends on the series, get disturbing. As if it's being overtaken by a sinister force, real or fake. Imagine the Max Headroom hijacking incident, but instead of this, it's this. Rerouting. The best way for me to describe analog horror is that it leaves so much interpretation to the viewer. Fear is subjective. Only we know what we're scared of. While there is a clear threat in most of these series, like the Walton Files or the Mandela Catalog with the animatronics or the alternates, our minds fill in those blanks as to how each action occurs or what happens next. And our minds, when we're scared, just assume the worst. We plug in what scares us most whenever we see an unexplained event like Brian or Cadaver's corpses popping up on screen. How did it happen? Well, we don't really know. But our brain likes to guess and fill in every blank. That's what makes analog horror so effective.
As I am editing this, I realize I forgot something really important. Analog horror is very repetitive and receives a lot of criticism for that. It's pretty much the same video every time. However, that doesn't mean that new things can't be tried. The Mandela Catalog is my favorite analog horror because it tries new things with every single episode. I think if analog horror is to stay alive, it's gonna have to adapt to changes and mix up the format. Because no one wants to see for like the 8th time in a row.
I could see an analog horror TV series in the future perfectly. I mean, come on. Imagine seeing
Doorslessness.
in the middle of the night. That would be utterly terrifying. Netflix actually had their own series with very similar aspects to analog horror titled Archive 81. Despite an 85% Rotten Tomatoes rating and hitting number 2 in the charts after only a week, it was cancelled after only one season. But I'd very much like to see a full-fledged analog horror series on TV instead of only being accessible on YouTube using our digital devices. Hey, speaking of digital...
Who's that?
Hello! I've been pulled out of the primordial soup to talk about digital horror. Digital horror is an umbrella term for multiple sections of modern stories, videos, games, and even movies that have been released. Ranging from creepypasta to unfriended, this genre mostly involves the supernatural or inhuman abruptly invading our daily lives. Let's start with online stories like creepypasta, SCPs, and r/nosleep. These online horror stories have been on the internet for almost as long as the internet itself has been in the hands of the average person. They're designed to bring fear into what is usually considered normal and innocent, especially if it's targeted towards children in a lot of cases. Creepypasta delves into the supernatural with topics of serial killers, kidnapping children, science experiments, or even just a sound in the woods ending up being a monster beyond belief. SCP goes more into a scientific essay route when it comes to its stories. The stories are meant to be interpreted as an SCP employee filing a report about a creature being detained or studied. And unlike the other two, r/nosleep normally goes for less supernatural entities and more into ghost stories, stalkers, or cults. This form of digital horror is usually meant to impact how you see your daily life rather than messing with you personally. Speaking of messing with you personally, let's talk about digital horror in video games. There's the obvious games of Amnesia, Outlast, and even Resident Evil, but that's not what I mean when I talk about digital horror in video games. Instead, I mean games like Doki Doki Literature Club, Simulacra, and even certain parts of Undertale. The main thing these games have in common is that they all break the fourth wall and talk to you, the player. By breaking the boundaries between fiction and reality, it causes a specific kind of fear in players' hearts by making them believe that the game they are playing is sentient. Common tactics are characters reading your desktop name or crashing the game itself after a jump scare. Another way of breaking the fourth wall in video games is old non-piracy screens, such as Mario Kart with the creepy Princess Peach and Void track, or the bizarre Fun is Infinite devil-faced Sonic from Sonic CD. Even certain games have anti-hacking code built in to unnerve the player, or even make the game completely unplayable. One example is the dirty hacker ending in Undertale where Sans calls you if you tamper with the game too much. Some players start rumors of specific usernames in RPGs or online chat rooms being cursed or hackers. This is common, especially for games and chat rooms targeted towards children, like Minecraft and Movie Star Planet. A lot of digital horror videos that aren't in the analog genre are normally filmed by YouTubers. Think of Darkiplier and Antisepticeye, or even Escape the Night. When it comes to evil YouTuber alter egos, they're usually created by the fans first and pop up around Halloween for any special videos the YouTubers do. Escape the Night, however, was really special with the fact that it was made on the internet, but it had a much larger production budget to add on to how much they could do horror-wise. There are also short film and animation channels focused around surrealist or downright terrifying content like Crypt TV, Meat Canyon, David Firth, also known as the creator of Salad Fingers, and the original Don't Hug Me I'm Scared series. Even mainstream media has fallen into the depths of digital horror, especially nowadays when Hollywood is struggling to keep up with the fast-paced trends of multiple social media platforms. The most notable examples are Unfriended, Spree, and Megan is Missing. Rather than being internet-based, they are commentaries on the horrific effects of constantly being attached to our devices. Unfriended is set in an online video chat room where people get killed off while a mysterious user joins with the name of a dead classmate, and the message is about cyberbullying. Spree shows a murderous influencer recording his crimes to get famous, and Megan is Missing being about internet safety and not trusting everyone you talk to online. Although they aren't created on the internet, and honestly feel a bit tone-deaf at times, it's still interesting to watch how large film studios are interpreting the modern-day teenagers and young adults into exaggerated, horrific scenarios. Well, now that I've told you all the different forms of media that include digital horror, I think it's time to jump back into that sweet, sweet pot of primordial soup I came from. Thank you for having me.